Ever get that feeling? Like you're staring at a Japanese sentence and it just feels backward.
It's a common experience, especially for English speakers.
It's like trying to read a map upside down or something.
Mhm.
But today, on our deep dive, we're tackling that very mystery, Japanese sentence structure, and maybe demystifying it a bit.
Hopefully we can shed some light on it, because while it's different from English, it's not random. There's a real elegance to how it all fits together.
And we've got, well, an expert to guide us.
Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I do find this stuff fascinating. And a good place to start is with this idea of head finality.
Okay, head finality is a new one. Sounds a little intense.
It's simpler than it sounds. Basically, it means the head of a phrase, the most important part, comes at the end. Like in English, we say, the cat's color.
Right, makes sense.
But in Japanese, it'd be more like cat possessive color. Color being the head in this case.
So it's not just about the word order, it's about this underlying structure where the modifier comes after the thing it's modifying.
Exactly. And this head finality thing, it's not just for simple phrases, it's like the foundation of how Japanese sentences are built.
Whoa, okay, so we're talking like the whole shebang. How does that even work when you get to more complicated sentences?
It's all about the order, really. Let's take
So they're like the grammar police of Japanese, making sure everything's in order.
more like tour guides, I'd say. They tell you how each word in a sentence relates to the others. Like, let's say you have a dog.
Who doesn't love a good dog analogy?
And this dog, let's say he's eaten a sandwich.
Okay, I can picture it.
If we wanted to emphasize that it was the dog and not, say, the cat who ate the sandwich, we'd use the particle ga after dog.
So ga is like shining a spotlight on the subject, saying, this is the important part. Pay attention.
Exactly. But now imagine we're just casually chatting about the dog, like, oh, the dog, yeah, he eats anything.
Yeah.
In this case, we'd use the particle wa after dog to show it's the overall topic we're talking about.
So ga for a focused subject, wa for a broader topic, those particles are doing a lot of heavy lifting.
They're subtle, but they make a world of difference, which is why they can be tricky to master.
Speaking of tricky, can we talk about those missing subjects? I mean, sometimes it feels like Japanese sentences are playing hide and seek with their subjects.
Ah, you've stumbled upon one of the most interesting things about the language. See, Japanese, it relies a lot on context.
Context.
Yeah, like what's already been said, who's talking, that kind of thing. And because of that, they often just drop subjects altogether when it's clear from the context who's doing what.
So like if I said, went to Japan last year, you'd probably just assume I was the one who went to Japan based on, me talking about it.
Exactly. It can be a little jarring at first, but it's actually very efficient. Why state the obvious over and over?
It's like a linguistic shorthand. So we've got this head final structure, these helpful particles, and a knack for ditching subjects when they're not needed. What else makes Japanese sentence structure unique? So last time, we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger talking about word classes in Japanese.
Ah, yes, those word classes. They can get pretty interesting.
Interesting how you mentioned adjectival nouns, which already has my head spinning a bit.
So picture this. In English, an adjective like, say, quiet, it pretty much stays the same no matter what the sentence is.
Right, quiet is quiet. Makes sense.
But in Japanese, these adjectival nouns, they can actually change their endings, just like verbs do.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that these adjective-noun hybrids can indicate tense?
Exactly. Let's say you're talking about a room that was quiet in the past. You wouldn't just use the standard form of the adjectival noun. You'd actually change the ending to match the past tense.
Whoa, okay. So it's not just describing something as quiet, it's about describing when it was quiet.
You got it. And that's just one example. These adjectival nouns, they've got a whole conjugation system going on. They can express present tense, past tense, even negative forms.
Okay, I have to admit, that's pretty cool. It's like they're borrowing the powers of verbs to become even more expressive.
That's a great way to put it. And it really highlights how, in Japanese, the line between different word classes, it's not always so clear-cut.
It's like the grammatical equivalent of a chameleon, changing its form depending on the environment. Now, if adjectival nouns are this dynamic, what about regular nouns? Are there any surprises lurking there?
Oh, there's a big one. You ready for this?
Hit me with it.
Japanese nouns, they don't have plural forms.
Wait, what? No plural forms. You mean like they don't have a way to distinguish between cat and cats?
Nope, not in the way we do in English. Remember how we talked about the importance of context?
Yeah, context is king in Japanese.
Right. So instead of relying on grammar to mark plurality, Japanese often just implies it through context, common sense, or by using words that already indicate a group.
Okay, so if I'm talking about a whole bunch of mountains, I wouldn't say mountains, I'd just say mountain, and they'd get it.
Pretty much. It might seem strange at first, but it's actually very efficient. Why add an extra syllable if you don't need to?
I guess when you put it like that, it makes sense. It's like their grammar is all about minimalism.
You could say that, but of course there are always exceptions to the rule.
Oh, I was waiting for the but. There's always a but.
While they don't have a universal plural marker, Japanese does have some tricks up its sleeve. Sometimes they'll use collective nouns like hirobiso for people, or they might add certain suffixes to a noun to create a sense of plurality.
Suffixes, huh? So it's not completely lawless in the world of Japanese plurals.
Exactly. Take the suffix tachi, for example. Add that to a noun and boom, you've got yourself a group, like kodomotachi for children.
So it's like tatachi is the Japanese equivalent of adding an S to make something plural.
Kind of, but not exactly. You see, these suffixes, they often carry a slightly different nuance than just a simple plural. They often emphasize the group as a whole, the collective identity, rather than just a bunch of individuals.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just about quantity, it's about this whole other layer of meaning. It seems like every corner we turn in Japanese grammar, there's another layer of subtlety to uncover.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? There's always more to learn, more to explore. Speaking of which, did you know that even the way we categorize and label parts of speech in Japanese, it's a subject of debate?
Wait, seriously? People are arguing about the very building blocks of the language.
Oh, yeah. And it gets pretty heated sometimes.
Heated debates about grammar. Now that's my kind of party. What's the contention this time?
Well, you know, we were talking about adjectival nouns earlier, right?
Yeah, those adjective-noun hybrids that can act like verbs, it's still blowing my mind a little.
Right. Well, even the term adjectival verb, some linguists argue that's not quite accurate.
Oh, really? What's the problem with adjectival verb?
Some linguists say it's oversimplifying things, that these words are more closely aligned with nouns, even though they have some verb-like qualities.
So it's like, are they wearing a verb costume or are they truly verbs at heart?
Exactly. And there's no easy answer. It all depends on how you interpret the linguistic evidence.
A good linguistic mystery. It's like those optical illusions where you can see it both ways.
That's a great analogy. It just goes to show language isn't always black and white. There's a lot of gray area, a lot of room for interpretation. And that's part of what makes it so fascinating to study.
It definitely keeps things interesting. But, speaking of fascinating and maybe a little mysterious,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier that Japanese borrows a lot of words from other languages.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Yeah, tons. It's actually pretty common for languages to borrow words from each other. Think about English, for example. We've got words from Latin, Greek, French. It's a real melting pot.
True. English is like that friend who just can't resist trying everyone else's snacks. But you were saying Japanese borrows a lot from Chinese.
Yeah, like a whole lot. A significant chunk of the Japanese vocabulary, it actually originated as Chinese loanwords.
Wow. Seriously. Like what kinds of words? Give me an example.
Well, a lot of it is nouns, which, when you think about it, makes sense. Objects, concepts, those are pretty easy to borrow. It's like you see a new tool, you learn its name, boom, you've added a word to your vocabulary.
Right. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Or in this case, the word wheel.
Exactly. But verbs and adjectives, those are a bit trickier to borrow. They're more deeply connected to a language's grammar.
So you're saying like borrowing a verb from another language would be like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole?
Yeah.
It just wouldn't work.
It'd be pretty messy. You'd have to basically rewire your entire grammatical system to make it fit. So, yeah, nouns, much easier to borrow.
Makes sense. So how did all these Chinese words end up in Japanese? Was it like a linguistic invasion?
Not quite an invasion, more like a slow and steady integration. You see, way back when, Japan didn't really have a writing system of their own.
No writing system at all. That's wild. How did they communicate in writing? Smoke signals, carrier pigeons.
Well, I'm sure they had their ways. But you can imagine not having a writing system, that makes things pretty difficult, especially when you're trying to, build a civilization, record history, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you're going to need more than smoke signals for that. So what did they do?
They turned to their neighbors, the Chinese, who, as you can imagine, had a pretty well-developed writing system at that point.
Smart move.
Right. So they started adapting Chinese characters, known as kanji, to represent Japanese words. And because they were borrowing these words, it was a pretty natural fit.
So, like, they saw the Chinese character for, I don't know, mountain, and we're like, hey, that looks like our word for mountain, too.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And over time, they incorporated more and more kanji, representing both those borrowed Chinese words and their own native Japanese vocabulary.
So the Japanese writing system we see today is like this amazing fusion of Chinese characters and, well, whatever they came up with to represent their own words.
I got it. It's a fascinating blend of borrowed and original elements, and it all started with those borrowed words.
It makes you realize just how interconnected languages really are. It's like they're constantly sharing and exchanging ideas, even on a grammatical level.
Exactly. And that cross-pollination, it's what makes language so dynamic, so alive.
It's like a giant linguistic tapestry with threads from all over the world woven together.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say we've done it again. We've taken a deep dive into a complex topic and hopefully come out the other side a little bit smarter.
I'd say so. We've covered a lot of ground today. From head finality and those all-important particles to the mysterious case of the missing plurals. And let's not forget those adjectival nouns.
They're not going to forget those adjectival nouns. But more than just memorizing grammar rules, what I love about these deep dives is that they really make you appreciate the beauty and complexity of language.
I totally agree. It's not just about communicating, it's about expressing ourselves in creative and nuanced ways. And Japanese, with its unique structure and borrowed elements, it's a perfect example of that.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that language is constantly evolving, constantly changing, as we, the speakers, shape it to fit our needs. Well said. So the next time you find yourself wrestling with a Japanese sentence, remember, there's a method to the madness. And who knows? You might even start to appreciate the elegance of it all. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of language.